A very boring history of everyday life. History is often presented as a story of dramatic events, powerful rulers and important wars. However, most of human history was not dramatic. Most of it was slow, repetitive, and ordinary people. Woke up, worked, ate, and slept. Then they did the same thing again the next day. This pattern continued for thousands of years. To understand this properly, we will begin a long time ago, early human life. For most of human existence, people lived as hunter-gatherers. This means they hunted animals and gathered plants. This lifestyle lasted for tens of thousands of years. During this period, there were no cities, no supermarkets, and no office jobs. Instead, people spent a large amount of time walking around looking for food. A typical day might involve waking up early. Someone would look for berries, someone else might search for roots or edible plants. Others might attempt to hunt animals. Sometimes they succeeded, sometimes they did not. When they did not succeed, people simply tried again the next day. This routine continued for many generations. There were no clocks, so people followed the sun. When the sun rose, people woke up. When the sun set, people usually slept. The pattern was simple and repeated for a very long time. The development of farming. Eventually, humans began farming. This change happened slowly. It did not occur in a single year or even a single century. Instead, people gradually learned that seeds placed in the ground could grow into plants. At first, farming was not necessarily easier than hunting and gathering. In fact, it could be more work. Farmers had to prepare soil, plant seeds, remove weeds, and wait for crops to grow mass. However, farming had one advantage: it allowed people to stay in one place. Because of this, small villages began to appear. These villages were usually very quiet places. People built simple houses made from mud, wood, or stone. Each day followed a predictable routine. A farmer woke up. The farmer checked the crops. The farmer worked in the fields. Later, the farmer ate dinner. When the farmer slept, the next day, the same process happened again, and again, and again. The growth of villages. Over time, villages slowly became larger. When villages became larger, they sometimes turned into towns. Towns often had a few extra features compared to villages. For example, a marketplace, a well for water, a few specialized workers such as potters or blacksmiths. Despite these changes, everyday life remained repetitive. Most people were still farmers. They still spent most of their day doing agricultural work. Weather was extremely important. If the weather was good, crops grew. If the weather was good, crops did not grow. When crops failed, life became difficult. Because of this, many people spent time worrying about rain. Early governments. As towns became larger, some form of organization became necessary. Leaders appeared. These leaders were sometimes kings, sometimes chiefs, and sometimes councils. However, the daily life of ordinary people changed very little. A farmer in one kingdom usually lived a life very similar to a farmer in another kingdom. They planted crops, harvested crops, and hoped nothing went wrong. Governments collected taxes. Taxes were usually paid with grain, animals, or labor. This meant that farmers worked not only for themselves but also for their rulers. Still, most days were quiet. There were no major events happening in the average village on most days. Long periods of routine. If you examine history carefully, you will notice something interesting. Major events are actually quite rare. Most years contain very few dramatic changes. Instead, history is mostly made of ordinary days. For example, imagine a farmer living 2,000 years ago. On Monday, the farmer works in the field. On Tuesday, the farmer works in the field again. On Wednesday, the farmer repairs a fence. On Thursday, the farmer feeds animals. On Friday, the farmer works in the field again. This schedule might continue for months. Nothing particularly exciting happens.
and that was normal. Tools and technology. Over time, tools improved slowly. Early farmers used simple tools made of stone or wood. Later, metal tools became more common. These improvements made certain tasks slightly easier, but they did not completely transform everyday life. A metal shovel is better than a wooden stick, but digging is still digging life. As a result, daily routines remained similar for centuries. Transportation. Travel in the past was slow. Most people walked almost everywhere. Some used animals such as horses or donkeys. Because travel was slow, many people spent their entire lives within a relatively small area. A person might be born in a village, live in that village, and eventually die in that same village. This means that their life experiences were often very predictable. They saw the same roads, the same buildings, the same fields. Every day looked.
Every day looked similar to the previous day. Food and meals. Meals were also repetitive. In many agricultural societies, people ate similar foods every day. For example, a typical meal might include grain or bread, vegetables, occasionally meat. Special meals were rare most of the time. People simply ate what was available. This routine repeated day after day. Breakfast might be simple. Lunch might be simple. Dinner might also be simple. Food was mainly about survival rather than excitement side, work and time. Another important detail is that people worked a lot. There were no modern machines, so tasks required physical effort. Farming, building, cooking, and repairing tools all required time and energy. Because of this, many people spent most of their waking hours working. The concept of weekends did not exist in most early societies. Instead, work followed seasonal cycles. Planting season, growing season, harvest season. Each season had its own routine tasks. Entertainment was simple and not very frequent. People might gather to tell stories, sing songs, or celebrate seasonal festivals. These events were important, but they did not happen every day. Most evenings were quiet. After working all day, many people were too tired for long activities. They might sit near a fire, talk briefly, and then go to sleep. The next morning, work would begin again. A slow passage of time. When studying history, it is easy to focus on big events like wars or discoveries. But these events were actually interruptions in a much longer pattern of ordinary life. For example, a war might last several years. That sounds dramatic. But before that war, there might have been 50 years of quiet farming. Then after the war, there might be another 50 years of quiet farming from the perspective of everyday people. Life often felt slow and repetitive. Generations. Another reason history feels boring at times is that changes happen gradually. A grandfather might live a life very similar to his father. A father might live a life very similar to his son. Clothing might change slightly, tools might improve slightly, but the structure of daily life often stay the same. Because of this, entire centuries could pass with relatively small differences in daily routines. Conclusion. In conclusion, much of history is not filled with dramatic events. Instead, it is filled with ordinary days. People woke up, they worked, they ate, they rested. Then they repeated the process. This pattern continued across thousands of years in many different cultures. While textbooks often focus on exciting moments, the truth is that most of human history was slow, predictable, and sometimes a little boring.
The medieval laundry story.
how people cleaned their clothes. Slowly. Imagine a medieval village. The sun rises over wooden houses with thatched roofs. People wake up, farmers go to the fields, bakers tend their ovens, and someone goes to wash clothes. But here's the twist. Washing clothes was not easy. There were no washing machines, no soap brands, no warm water taps. In fact, most clothes were only washed once a year. Why so rare? Water was heavy to fetch from wells or rivers. Soap was expensive and made from animal fat. Washing was physically exhausting. Boiling, scrubbing, rinsing, and beating cloth on rocks. So instead of frequent washing, people relied on other methods. Sun and air, clothes were hung outside to freshen up. Perfumes and herbs, lavender, rosemary, and rose petals help mask smells away. Linen undergarments, these were easier to clean and protected outer garments from sweat. The average laundry day. On a typical laundry day.
Morning. Fill buckets with river water. Midday.
Boil water in huge cauldrons.
Afternoon. Scrub clothes on rocks or wooden planks.
Evening. Rinse and hang outside to dry. This could take the entire day and often only happened once or twice a year. Imagine spending your day scrubbing and soaking clothes instead of doing literally anything else. Social life of laundry.
Surprisingly, laundry was also a social event. Women gathered by the river, shared gossip, exchanged recipes, and sometimes even solved village disputes while scrubbing so. Even though the task was boring, it had small moments of connection.
Evolution over time. As centuries passed, laundry slowly improved. 17th century.
Metal washboards appear. 19th century.
Soap production becomes cheaper.
19th century.
Industrial laundry machine.
Even then, for most ordinary people, laundry remained a long, repetitive chore until the 20th century. Takeaway.
Medieval life was not all castles and battles. For most people, life was a cycle of repetitive chores. Laundry may sound boring, but it shows the patience, effort, and ingenuity of people in history.